The sun beat down on the small frontier town of Dry Creek, its heat baking the dust into a hard crust beneath worn boots. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, horsehair, and sun-baked timber. Saturday auctions were always noisy, cattle bawling, traders shouting bids, the auctioneer's voice rolling like thunder across the crowd. But this Saturday, there was something different in the air. Near the far end of the wooden platform, where sacks of grain and harnesses were stacked, a young woman stood stiffly between two rough-looking men. Her wrists weren't bound, but the grip one man had on her arm told everyone she wasn't free to leave. Her dress was faded, her boots worn to the sole. Yet her chin was lifted just enough to show there was still a trace of pride in her. Her name was Anna Whitlow. She'd buried her parents young, survived 2 harsh winters with little more than scraps, and had thought she'd found safety living with distant relatives. She'd been wrong. Gambling debts had swallowed every penny her uncle had, and when the creditors came calling, they decided Anna was just another asset they could sell. The auctioneer, a tall man with a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, slapped his palm against the podium. "And next up, folks, we've got ourselves a fine young lady here, strong back, knows her way around a cook fire. Who'll start the bid at $20? There was a ripple of murmurs. A few men chuckled. Others stared with the same detached interest they'd give a mule. Anna's stomach twisted. Then, in the crowd, she saw him. A tall cowboy leaned casually against the split-rail fence at the edge of the square. His hat was pulled low, shadowing sharp cheekbones and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days. He wasn't talking to anyone, wasn't laughing, wasn't bidding. Just watching. Something in Anna's chest tightened. He didn't look cruel like the others, didn't have the hungry eyes of men who saw her as property. He looked lonely. Worn, maybe. As if he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. Her heart pounded. She knew she had seconds before the first bid sealed her fate. Taking a shaky breath, she stepped forward, eyes fixed on him. The crowd noise faded until all she heard was her own voice, low, trembling, yet desperate. "Please take me," she whispered, her words meant only for him. "I can cook. I can bear you children too." The cowboy didn't flinch. Didn't move for a long moment. But his gaze held hers, steady, searching, while the auctioneer's call grew louder in the background. Anna's knees felt weak. This was her only chance. If he looked away, she'd be lost to whoever's hand went up first. Then she saw it, the faintest tightening of his jaw, the smallest spark in his eyes. Somewhere deep inside her, hope flickered. The auctioneer's voice rang over the square, sharp and relentless. $20. Do I hear 25? 25 for a young lady who can work a ranch kitchen, mend clothes, and... He chuckled, glancing at the crowd. Probably more than that. Laughter rolled through the men gathered near the stage. Anna's fingers clenched into the folds of her skirt. Every passing second felt like a door closing. The tall cowboy still hadn't moved, and she wondered if he'd even heard her plea, or if she was just another desperate face in a world full of them. But the truth was, Luke Maddox had heard her. He'd heard every word. And it had been a long time since words had hit him that hard. He wasn't a man who came to auctions for anything other than supplies. Human sales, though legal out here, were something he usually turned away from. They reminded him of too many nights sitting by his father's grave, knowing the man had traded his own pride for survival. Luke had sworn he'd never treat a person like cattle. And yet, here she was. When Anna had spoken, her voice wasn't just desperate, it was raw, honest. No performance, no coy smiles. She was bargaining for her life with nothing but truth. Luke's eyes swept over her quickly, not like the others, but searching for signs, the way she held herself despite the fear, the steadiness in her gaze. She wasn't begging for pity. She was offering herself as someone who could pull her weight. The auctioneer slammed his palm again. "We've got 25. Do I hear 30? A heavy-set rancher with a sneer on his face raised his hand. The kind of man Luke knew all too well, the kind who'd grind a soul down just to watch it break. Anna's pulse hammered in her ears. Her breath caught as the man grinned at her. Luke's stomach twisted. He could walk away. It wasn't his fight. He had no need for a wife, no time for someone else's burdens. His ranch was quiet, lonely, but it was safe. And maybe that's why his next move felt less like a choice and more like instinct. His gloved hand rose slowly, cutting through the heat and the noise. The auctioneer's head snapped toward him. 35. Do I hear 40? The heavy-set rancher frowned, then upped his bid. Luke didn't blink. 50, he said, his voice steady, deep. The murmurs in the crowd grew. That was more than most men would pay for a stranger. The rancher hesitated, grumbling under his breath. After a long pause, he shook his head. Sold, the auctioneer barked. To the cowboy in the hat, $50 even. The square erupted with chatter, but Luke barely heard it. His eyes were on Anna, and for the first time since she'd been brought to the stage, her shoulders eased just slightly. Luke didn't know her story yet. He didn't know what kind of trouble she might bring. But he knew one thing, he wasn't letting her go back to the wolves. The crowd was still buzzing as Luke stepped forward, pulling a small leather pouch from his coat. The coins clinked heavily into the auctioneer's hand, and just like that, Anna was no longer under the ownership of the town, but under his. Luke offered her a hand down from the wooden platform. She hesitated, eyes darting from his weathered face to the tall frame that towered over her. "Ma'am," he said quietly. His voice was steady, with none of the mocking edge she'd grown used to from strangers. She took his hand. It was calloused, warm, and for some reason, she felt steadier as her feet met the dusty ground. The crowd slowly began to drift away, but Anna could still feel the lingering eyes of men who'd been willing to buy her for their own purposes. Her stomach knotted. Luke tipped his hat toward the road. "My horse is this way." They walked in silence at first, her boots crunching over the dry dirt, his longer strides careful to match hers. When they reached a tall, chestnut mare tied to a post, Luke untied the reins and gave the horse's neck a gentle pat. "This here's Maggie. She's steady, but you'll want to hold on." Anna blinked at him. You're not making me walk." His brow furrowed. "It's 20 miles to my ranch. I don't see the sense in dragging a lady through the dust." Her cheeks warmed at the word lady. It had been years since anyone called her that without sarcasm. Luke swung himself into the saddle, then reached a hand down. She hesitated again, this time not out of fear, but out of the sheer strangeness of this moment. When she finally took his hand, he pulled her up behind him with ease. She settled awkwardly, her hands hovering before she finally gripped the sides of his coat. "Better hold on a little tighter," he said without looking back. The first mile passed in silence except for the rhythmic clop of Maggie's hooves. Anna's mind raced. She had spoken those desperate words, "Please take me, I can cook, I can bear you children," without thinking about what they truly meant. Now she was riding into the unknown with a man whose kindness she didn't yet understand. "You always buy strangers at auction?" she asked finally, her voice carrying a cautious edge. "No," Luke said simply. "First time." "Why me?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I didn't like the look in the other fella's eyes. And because you looked like you'd fight to survive, not just sit and wait for life to happen." Anna swallowed. "And what do you expect me to do now?" "You said you can cook," he replied. "I believe you. My ranch hands will be glad for a proper meal. Other than that, you'll figure out where you fit." His answer was simple, without demands, and yet Anna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than his slow, careful words. The land stretched out before them, golden grass swaying under the late afternoon sun, distant hills glowing in a haze. For the first time in months, she felt something she almost didn't recognize. Hope. But deep down, she also knew, hope could be dangerous. And she had no idea yet if this cowboy was the man who might save her, or the one who could break her. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in deep orange and purple streaks. Anna's legs were numb from the long ride, but her senses were wide awake. Luke slowed Maggie to a trot, then to a walk, letting her take in the sight. The ranch sprawled out like something from another world, wooden fences stretching across rolling fields, a large barn standing proud in the distance, and a main house with a wide porch that seemed to wrap its arms around whoever stepped onto it. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, carrying the faint smell of wood and roasted meat. It didn't look like the kind of place where cruelty lived. But Anna knew better than to trust appearances. Luke dismounted first, then offered his hand to help her down. She landed stiffly on her feet, wincing from the hours in the saddle. "You'll get used to it," he said, leading Maggie toward the hitching post. "Ranch work isn't gentle on anybody." Anna followed, her eyes darting to the barn. She could hear the restless stomping of horses inside, the bleating of a few goats, the rustle of hay. The ranch hands emerged from the barn, 3 men, all dusty and broad-shouldered, pausing mid-step to stare at her. Not in the hungry way the auction crowd had stared, but in that curious, measuring way men do when something unexpected arrives in their world. "This here's Miss Anna," Luke said without ceremony. "She'll be cooking for us from now on." One of the men tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Anna nodded, unsure if she should smile or keep her guard up. Inside the house, the air was warm, smelling faintly of leather and fresh bread. The wooden floors creaked under her boots as she stepped into a kitchen that looked worn but welcoming, a large wood-burning stove, a sturdy table scarred by years of meals and conversation, cupboards filled with mismatched crockery. Luke set down her small cloth bag, the only possession she'd brought with her, and gestured toward the counter. "We've got some meat thawed in the icehouse. Could use a good stew for supper if you're up for it." The request was gentle, but something in her chest tightened. Cooking for men wasn't new to her, but cooking for strangers, in a home that wasn't hers, felt vulnerable. Still, she nodded. "I can make stew." As she washed her hands in the basin, Luke lingered by the door. "Anna, I'm not gonna pretend we know each other. But you're here now. You've got a roof over your head, food in your belly, and no one here's gonna harm you. You can believe that or not, it's up to you." She looked over her shoulder. "Why tell me that?" "Because I figure you've had too many folks say the opposite without using words." His meaning hit her like a sudden gust of wind, quiet but undeniable. That night, she worked in silence, letting the rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring the pot settle her nerves. The ranch hands came in one by one, washing up before taking their seats at the long table. Luke sat at the head, his hat hung neatly on the wall, waiting until everyone was served before he picked up his spoon. The first bite brought a murmur from one of the men. "Best stew we've had in months." Anna didn't answer, but her chest swelled just enough for her to notice. After supper, she stepped out onto the porch alone. The air was crisp, filled with the smell of earth and distant pine. Stars were beginning to scatter across the sky, brighter than she'd ever seen in town. For the first time in a long while, no one was shouting at her, no one was grabbing her arm, and no one was treating her like a possession. But deep inside, a quiet fear still whispered, kindness can be taken away just as quickly as it's given. And as she heard Luke's boots on the porch behind her, she realized, whatever his reasons were for bringing her here, the unspoken truth between them was still waiting to be revealed. Morning came with the sound of roosters and the creak of the windmill turning in the pale light. Anna woke early, wrapped in the quilt Luke's sister had handed her the night before. She lay still for a moment, listening to the distant thud of boots on the barn floor, the whinny of horses, and the muffled clink of pails being set down. For the first time in months, she'd slept through the night. No shouts. No threats. No pounding on the door. She pulled on the dress she'd washed and dried by the fire, then stepped quietly into the kitchen. The stove was cold, but there was flour, butter, and a jug of milk waiting on the counter. Without thinking, she began making biscuits, her hands moving with the muscle memory of 100 mornings like this in another life. Luke came in from the barn just as she was sliding the tray into the oven. His shirt was damp at the collar from work, his hair ruffled by the wind. "Smells like you've been busy," he said. "Biscuits. Figured it'd be a good start to the day," she replied, brushing her hands on her apron. He nodded, but there was a heaviness in his expression. "Anna, after breakfast, there's something I need to show you." They ate in near silence, the ranch hands offering their thanks before heading out to the fields. Luke stayed behind, leaning back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her as though weighing whether to speak at all. When the dishes were done, he motioned for her to follow. They walked past the barn, through the pasture, and toward a lone oak tree standing on a small hill. Beneath it, a weathered headstone stood, the letters softened by time. Anna stopped short. The name carved into the stone was Margaret Holton. "My wife," Luke said quietly. "She died 4 winters ago. Fever took her quick." Anna swallowed hard, unsure why he had brought her here. She was gentle. Could talk to a wild horse and have it eating from her hand in 10 minutes. "We wanted children, tried for years. But the Lord had other plans." His voice was steady, but his hand tightened into a fist at his side. Anna looked down, her own memories of loss rising unbidden. "I didn't bring you here from pity," Luke went on. "I brought you here because you reminded me of her. Not in the way you look, but in the way you stood in that auction yard. Shoulders back, eyes steady, even when the world was trying to strip you down to nothing." Her breath caught. You saw that?" "I saw everything," he said. "I saw a woman who deserved a chance. And I figured maybe I could give one, same way I wish someone had given Margaret and me another." Anna felt the ground tilt beneath her. No one had ever spoken of her worth before, not like this. Men had spoken of what she could do for them, never of who she was. Luke stepped closer, his voice lower now. "Anna, you don't owe me anything. Not cooking, not children, not a thing. I don't expect you to be my wife. This place, it's yours for as long as you want it. You can work, save money, and if one day you decide to go, I'll make sure you leave with enough to start fresh anywhere you please." Her throat tightened. "Why? You barely know me." "Because somebody's got to break the chain," he said simply. "Somebody's got to stop the taking and start the giving. Out here in the West, we either look out for each other, or we end up just like the men at that auction. I'm not gonna be one of them." Anna blinked hard against the sting in her eyes. For so long, she had prayed for rescue, not just from her circumstances, but from the belief that she was only worth what she could trade. Luke's words cracked that belief wide open. She stepped forward, laying her hand on the weathered wood of the fence post beside him. "I'll stay. Not because I owe you, but because, maybe I can belong here." His eyes softened, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Then you already do." As they walked back toward the house, the morning sun rose higher, spilling gold across the fields. The fear that had clung to her for so long seemed to loosen with every step. Anna knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but here, under the wide western sky, she had been given something far more valuable than security. She had been given a choice. And in that choice, she found her freedom.